What's up, guys? I'm back. This is Paul. This is Pauline Theologies. We're continuing our study of James, and today we are on James chapter 1, 19 through 21. If you have been following along, you know there have been three themes that we've been talking about. One is wisdom, two is trials and tribulations, and then three is the rich and the poor. And so as we continue on studying through this, we're going to see a little bit of wisdom that's going to come out in this section. So let's go and dive in. If you haven't read it yet, go and stop the tape, read 19 through 21. If you have, let's go ahead and jump in. He says, know this. What is the scripture saying is the first question, guys. He says, know this, that every man should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And the reason for this is because the anger of man doesn't achieve the righteousness of God. And so because of that, now he says, put aside all of this filthiness and evil and rampant evil that you have, and receive the word implanted in us, able to save our souls. And so he's saying, giving us an instruction here, that in order for us to be wise, is that we should listen. You've heard the saying, you got two ears and one mouth. Well, that's kind of what he's saying right now, is listen first. Listen to see what's going on instead of trying to say something every time, to be responsive to something every time. And then also to anger. Now, the anger that James is talking about is different from the anger, righteous anger that God has. He says, and he gives a specific thing. He says, the anger of man doesn't achieve the anger of God or the righteousness of God. And we know that God is angry at sin, and he pours out his wrath upon it. The same word for anger is wrath. And in the Greek language is orge. And so the anger that God has is justified. And that's not to say that we don't have justified anger, but it's saying that in most cases that we as human beings tend to go a little too far with our anger. And so that's in some passages why Paul in other passages says that let God have his justification, let him have the vengeance. He also says don't let your sun go down in anger, because it gives Satan an opportunity. It's because anger is dangerous. But then he continues to say those things. He says, and so be slow to speak. And because we know that this anger and this wrath doesn't achieve the righteousness of God, he says, let us now receive the word that is able to save our souls. And how we receive it is the key. It's in humility. You see, a person has to humble himself before God in order to even receive this word that's implanted in us, able to save our souls, which is the gospel. And so in order for us to be able to receive the gospel, we have to actually first bend down on knee and understand that God is king, rightly estimating ourselves versus God. Okay, so what do we see about God in the scripture? I think that is, we see God's anger is a righteous one when it happens, man. And it's good that he has it, because the love that he has for us desires that when someone mistreats his people, anger rises and he takes action. Anger rises and he takes action. And then I think another thing is that God's eyes are on the humble. You see, when he recognizes that we humble ourselves before him, recognizing that we know that he is God, man, his favor pours out, his grace pours out. He puts that word in us that changes us and makes us his children, part of his kingdom. But what does it say about man? Well, I think it's giving man instruction. It gives people instruction that we should listen. We should be attentive. See what's going on. Because sometimes we have a skewed sense of justice, because when someone says something, anger rises so quickly that it turns to something else. So that's why it says listen first. Get the facts. Get all that you need to know. I think it was Abraham Lincoln, if I'm correct, who says that a wise man can be found, or wait, he says something. Now I'm just messing it up, but I think it was like even an ignorant man or a dumb man seems wise when he doesn't speak. You know what I mean? It's because when you quickly speak, you might not say the right things, and it makes you sound dumb. And so James is trying to let us understand that listening is important to understand the situation before we speak and before we rise to anger. And then I think it's also saying that man needs to be humble in salvation. Like I said earlier, we need to rightly esteem ourselves in accordance to God, knowing that He's a holy and just God. Then we recognize our sin is completely and utterly evil. And then that is when He's able to save us. That is when He's able to save us. So, how can we apply these truths to our lives today? Well, I think we should listen more, hear people out. Don't just give an answer, but listen to understand and to sympathize. Put yourself in that person's shoes. I think things can go a long way when we do that in relationships. When we do that in relationships is with our families, with a husband and wife, with spouses, with children, with parents. Man, if we just listen for a second to see where they're coming from, to know what they're about, instead of instantly answering, we create a safe space for people to grow, where they will be wanting to tell us our things because they'll know that we care for them enough to listen. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't supposed to say something, because we're going to find out later on that, yeah, we absolutely need to speak on some things. Especially, we see that there's a lot of things going on between the rich and the poor, and how we should speak out against it, how we should take action, because it says that faith without works is dead, is what we're going to see. But first, listen. Listen. I appreciate you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.